This is Cardano on the daily chart. It's crazy to look at, everybody. This is May. This is going back to May. So essentially, we've been in kind of this sideways consolidation since May. Like a whole season, we've been tracking this. And prior to that, it was just Cardano falling into the bear market. It's been a very interesting cycle. It's been incredibly insightful from a data perspective to see what is happening and transpiring with these Cardano charts. And now here we are. You can see this green box. We're days away now from Vasil Hard fork. This is the biggest event in Cardano history. It just is. This is such a huge fundamental milestone for the blockchain itself. And when it comes to Cardano looking to solve, the trilemma in crypto and looking to really innovate in the crypto space and make an impact on the world, this scalability upgrade that's found in Vasil is really big in doing that. And it has such a meaningful impact on the macro, on the zoomed out look of Cardano. It has such a meaningful impact. That must be highlighted. But I say that because there's so much speculation with this upgrade in the short term. I think a lot of people like to think there's a huge upgrade coming. Price, let's see what it does. Maybe it's just going to change the game and just moon. And that's something that we've actually discussed. That kind of mindset and the data surrounding it, right? We've already established, and it's right here on the screen, that in bull markets, these events seem to be extremely helpful for Cardano, right? You can see going into these hard fork events in these bullish environments, ADA just outperformed. It did really well. And we've been tracking that narrative. How's it going to do going into Vasil Hard fork in a bear market? You obviously see it didn't moon. It didn't go crazy like what it was doing in the bullish environments. But if you look at an ADA BTC pair, check this out. ADA BTC since May 2022 on this daily chart, it's hanging in there. And that might have something to do with the Vasil Hard fork. So while ADA is not mooning and seeing all-time highs or anything crazy like that, or on its way to all-time highs, it seems to be hanging in there pretty solidly. And the question is, without everything going on from a fundamental perspective with Cardano, could Cardano actually be way less than it is now? That's potentially true. But besides that, I want to point this out. And actually, this just happened, so it's a great example. This is Ethereum. This is Ethereum on the daily chart. Ethereum just went through its biggest event in its own history. It literally moved from proof of work to proof of stake. And this is what the chart looks like. And it kind of, there maybe was like kind of a sell the news type of move, but in general, pretty much following the rest of crypto markets, nothing out of the ordinary on the short term. But just like we just talked about for Vasil, for Cardano, for the long term, the meaningful impact that's there, Ethereum and what just happened, there's a meaningful impact there on the long term, on the macro. But we can't shy away from the fact, everybody, that this space is so new. It's $1 trillion market cap as a whole, right? So there are bigger things when we're zoomed in, especially that are playing into the moves in every crypto, the price moves of every crypto. And the biggest thing that we can look at right now is what's going on. What are those big things that are impacting it? Before we dive into the ADA charts and talk about Vasil coming up, what I'm looking at, anticipating in terms of ADA price, this is the S&P 500 index. You cannot ignore it. We cannot ignore this. This is what markets are following, and this all revolves around the story and the narrative that is happening right now across the world from so many different perspectives. So right now on the S&P 500 index chart, you can just see from the swing low in June to this previous swing high, this chart actually testing a higher low Fibonacci that I'm going to personally be tracking myself. I'm curious to see how it holds in this Fibonacci, especially going into this next week, because this next week, and this plays into Cardano, it plays into the cryptocurrency space. Here's what we have going on. And especially plays into ADA because Cardano, the Vasil Hard fork on the 22nd, well, guess what? Rate hikes coming the day before on the 21st. So markets, the high impact role that they have in Cardano, it's kind of no match for Vasil Hard fork, in my opinion, in terms of the short term. So Fed seen raising to 4% in 2022 and signaling higher for longer. Economist consensus is for 75 basis point hike next week. So everybody's expecting a 75 basis point hike. If that happens, maybe it's already priced into markets. Maybe actually next week markets actually go green, and right, that could be good for ADA. with Vasil Hard fork happening. And we're going to track that and talk about that in a minute. Rates seen staying at peak in 2023 as Fed battles inflation. So this is kind of a more macro narrative that I think we should start paying attention to as a whole from a cryptocurrency perspective. But going over here to the ADA charts, here's what we're looking at on the zoomed out. And I want to start here because it's important. We're going to dig into this green box and what's going on in this, especially in this upcoming week. But I just want to, I can't help but zoom out. And really, I haven't done this, I feel like, in a little bit. Just zoom out and just look at this picture. I know there's some lines and stuff going on there, but look at this picture. We have ADA sitting at 46 cents, and these are not placed from a time frame perspective. Like, I'm not saying it's going to hit these areas in 2023, but just look at this. A $15 ADA is a $500 billion market cap. That continues. I was just like thinking about this. This continues to just blow my mind. A $15 ADA is a $500 billion market cap, which is a market cap Ethereum has already seen. It's history. It's done. Ethereum's been there. For Cardano to get there, for me, it's just so realistic, especially as I think Cardano proves itself. I want to point that out as we're getting ready to zoom in on the charts here. And then a $31 ADA is a $1 trillion market cap. I think it's in play in the future. I think it's possible for what Cardano is building and what's possible on the Cardano blockchain. I just want to say that. So, and that's all to say, zoom out. And especially if you're a macro investor, if you're here for the long term, always zoom out, especially as we start zooming in, because we're all watching the charts all the time. We're all trying to find our way out of the bear market. When's crypto going to exit? So that's why we're tracking it on the short term. It really keeps us on our toes. It keeps our minds prepared so that we know, hey, how am I accumulating? What am I doing? Am I comfortable with it at any given time? Am I ready? That's what this is all about. So if we're looking at Cardano here on the weekly, you can see we're in that green box. We have the Vasil Hard fork days away, and we're just also just hovering just above this huge macro support, that trend line that goes all the way back to 2018. We know the drill there. We've talked about that many times, and you can just see it on this chart. Look at this, all the way back here, 2018, that dotted yellow line. Then we start digging into the charts, and this is where all these narratives come from. What's going on with ADA? Here's a headline: why the Cardano price might be on the verge of another decline. And this article actually goes on to talk about a pattern that Peter Brandt, kind of pretty famous technical analyst, just charted for ADA recently in a descending triangle, right? So that's what it's talking about here. It's bringing into context the Vasil upgrade and everything going on. I think it is, yeah, Vasil upgrade. It brings that into context, but basically talking about on the short term, midterm, there could be a big dip coming based on the descending triangle. I wanted to bring that up because when we're looking at the ADA charts, he's showing a descending triangle there, right? A descending triangle would consist of really a flat lower trend line and then a descending upper trend line. But you all know we've been tracking this lower trend line, and for me, it's kind of been, it's very small, but it's higher lows at the lower trend line, and then it's lower highs, kind of jamming ADA into this ascending triangle. We're right around the apex, and we've been tracking that. But my point is this: Peter Brandt, a very popular analyst, a lot of people like him, a lot of people disagree with him. Doesn't matter. He doesn't know. Nobody knows. You know, I think I was looking at Jim Cramer, famous TV guy, and his stock picks. I think historically is like 51%, like his win rate is. And I think that was based on like 3 months of previous data or something like that. But my point is, nobody knows. But either way, you have a descending triangle here. You have a symmetrical triangle, which we've been discussing. We're at this apex area coming on the heels right here of Vasil Hard fork coming up. And it's getting ready to probably make a move. And here's the difference: a move to the upside close to $1 in the dollar range, a move to the downside below 30 cents. So prepare. That at the end of the day, that's the bottom line, right? Prepare in the short term for both of those scenarios, right? The short to midterm. But at the end of the day, nobody knows exactly what is going to happen. But I want to talk about, in the purpose of this video, what I'm anticipating. There's a couple things in play right now that I'm anticipating, you know, within context of those two targets, of course. So number one is this: we cannot forget the S&P 500. We cannot forget the headline news here. This is number one for me, because if markets going into next week are already kind of like, hey, we're priced in the 75 basis point hike that's coming on Wednesday, and we're ready for it, and there's no real negative reaction, right? And maybe even there's a positive reaction, and the S&P 500 is bouncing off of this area and seeing some upside. Well, in that scenario, I'm looking at ADA charts and I'm saying ADA has held pretty strong, right? Especially in recent weeks and months. You can see evidence of that again on the ADA BTC pair. It's held pretty strong. So if traditional markets are going green, and then I have to throw this in there too, if the US dollar index, and I have the chart, it starts consolidating down. This is speculative. We have to wait and see what happens. If this starts kind of trickling down, it could be a pretty powerful week for crypto next week. And if that is the case, and if it's a strong week for crypto next week, I think there's a strong case that ADA on the short term can actually outperform to the upside in terms of crypto markets. And we'll see what happens, right? This is speculative, but that's one scenario I'm anticipating going into next week, especially as, again, ADA is just consolidating kind of in this pattern that we've been discussing, right? And it's very close to the apex. So all of these things coming together right at the apex of that triangle for ADA. Now, on the flip side, if ADA sees downside, guess what? It's likely going to be because S&P 500 not doing well. Maybe the US dollar currency index is seeing another high put in, right? It depends what next week brings, but this is why we prepare. It's all going to come off the back of this if ADA is falling. But here's what I'm watching for with ADA in an environment even where it's falling. So we just talked about the scenario where it's moving up and even actually outperforming. And I want to state that because I know in this video it sounds like I'm just saying, hey, ADA is going up or down. But I'm looking to see actually ADA outperforming in both scenarios. That's my biggest thing that I'm watching for. So ADA is outperforming in markets. That means that on the ADA BTC pair, it will be just cruising to the upside. But even to the downside, if markets are going red, I'm really watching this chart. This is the ADA BTC chart. It's very up in the air, obviously, what's going to happen. But we've been kind of tracking this. In my view, it's been this potential like head and shoulder setup, right? The left shoulder, the head, and this trickling sideways, very weak right shoulder. The weak right shoulder to me at the right below the neckline here, downward sloping neckline, it kind of for me shows, this is the ADA BTC pair, by the way, shows strength of ADA against Bitcoin, right? It shows that the bears are kind of, it's not a strong right shoulder where it's coming down a lot before the retrace back up to the neckline. It's pretty weak right shoulder, meaning the bulls are keeping some upward pressure there. And then we've actually gotten a break above the head and the inverse head and shoulders neckline, and then a revisit to the neckline. So this chart is really intriguing to me going into next week to see, well, how is the strength of ADA holding up in whether it's a bullish macro environment, right? And that's including traditional markets. And how is it holding up in terms of a bearish environment for all charts, even equity markets and traditional markets and everything. So this chart, the ADA BTC, I think is really going to tell that story. And this is probably the most exciting chart to watch for next week for ADA, obviously alongside this USD chart, because the USD chart is just, it continues to get squeezed. Haven't even talked about everything else going on. Obviously, the 20-day moving average, ADA is below that right now as I record the video. And once again, have to point out the support area. So the support area for ADA on this USD, it's that macro yellow trend line there. And then it's this shorter term white trend line of higher lows you see. So from where ADA is as I do the video, it's like 7% or so to the downside. On the ADA BTC pair, I want to point this out, which is back to that neckline for ADA on the ADA BTC pair. We're looking at around 6 to 7% to that area as well. So it will be interesting to see what ADA does with both of these areas. This is what I'm watching, but I can't stress this enough, everybody. The events happening, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's Cardano Vasil Hard fork this upcoming week, they're big events, but they're more powerful and impactful in the macro. and the macro story of what's going on fundamentally and how that does affect price, especially going into the next bull market. Something like Cardano Vasil Hard fork, introducing this scalability upgrade is going to allow Cardano to really, I think, in my view, outperform much of the cryptocurrency space, especially in the next bull market. And I think that's what's getting ready to happen. So we're going to track all of these things, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you've watched this long, I want to point out the Rare Bloom event 28 days ago. This isn't sponsored. They're not sponsoring this video. I just wanted to give them a shout out. I've been in talks with them about this event, and 28 days to go. Go get tickets if you have the time and availability on the 14th and 15th of October. $175 off per night on hotel rooms. So I just want to support these guys as they're throwing this event. There's just a ton of Cardano people going. Look at all the companies, the sponsors, the speakers. It's just going to be a really cool event. We're unable to go, but I want to support the team and support, all you out there in the Cardano community. So wanted to give them a quick shout out. So everybody, I appreciate you. I really do. Hit the subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Hit that like button. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.